YC is, like to me, like the best kind of like accelerator in the world. And the fact that they have like crazy kind of low acceptance rate and you get accepted, like, and to decline that, I think that's one of the hardest decisions that I had to make.
Hey everyone, I'm Kenny and welcome to Startup Spotlights, my new show where I showcase the stories of how successful entrepreneurs built their business. As an early stage investor, I spend a lot of my time talking to visionary founders who are reshaping industries and tackling some of the world's toughest problems. It's incredibly exciting to hear the stories of how these entrepreneurs take their idea and turn it into a thriving business. That's why I created this show, to pull back the curtains on these conversations and let you in on some of these amazing stories. If that sounds exciting to you, don't forget to hit subscribe. I'll be interviewing a new founder every single week and showcasing how they brought their idea to life. Every business encounters pivotal moments that redefine its trajectory and shapes its success for the future. In today's story, we have Bianca Ho, co-founder and COO of WATI, and we dive into some of those pivotal moments that shaped what WATI is today. Now, Bianca grew up in Hong Kong, but spent some time in the States where she got exposed to coding and technology. Her grandmother, who she lived with, ran an import and export business, and that was some of the early inspiration for her entrepreneurial spirit. When she graduated college, she took a job as a banker at JP Morgan, but always knew that she wanted to do something in entrepreneurship and business.
In Asia, like when you graduate, you usually write a paper, like not a paper, like it's like a school book, right? Like a yearbook in your sense. And then we'll write like, hey, like, what do you like? Like, and now I still kind of go and look back to some of my friends. And it's quite interesting how it turned out. And one of the things that says is like, oh, my future occupation, I wrote CEO. I don't know how I came up with that idea at like 12 years old, but that's kind of what I wrote. But anyways, like, to your question, I think with the, like, I was actually toying with a couple ideas when I was at JP Morgan, like just working with a friend on the weekend, doing kind of rapid prototyping. It was mainly on the productivity space because, that was something that I'm very passionate about, like, hey, how to become more productive. And it kind of like, it didn't go well, right? Like we did a couple kind of user interviews and like no one had that need, or it was not strong enough for anyone to kind of pay. Everyone was like, oh, I use pen and paper, or like, hey, I just use notes. So that was kind of like where we ended. But eventually, when I met with my co-founder, like this was super obvious, and also because of my experience after one guy at Zendesk, I think it was like a very good, yeah, like it just kind of like, oh, like this kind of made sense, like it connected the dots.
Got it. And is that where you met your co-founder, Ken, at One Sky, or were you connected through a different way?
Yeah, so actually, we were connected by a VC who I've met in Zendesk. Yeah, so he was like, "Hey, this guy's just like looking for a co-founder, a technical kind of person," and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I've always wanted to start a business, and in order to start a tech business, it's necessary to have someone who's like really, really good in tech. So I'm extremely lucky to kind of meet Ken. I mean, it was more like it was set up more like a blind date and it's like say like, hey, like, is this gonna work out? Is it not? Like honestly, I don't know. But like 8 years later, we're still kind of working very closely together. We eat lunch almost every single day. So yeah, it's really, really good to work with him. And I think we have a very similar set of values. And yeah, we're just extremely lucky to kind of work with one another.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's incredibly important to really enjoy the person that you're working with, especially since we spend most of our day like with
Waking time.
exactly like working and with those people. So it's great to hear that you guys still have such a great relationship and still eat lunch together.
Yes, we do. We do. Like, I mean, yeah, there's like a bit of everything. And I mean, like we've gone through so much, right? Like from, uh, like we were just eating, having dinner, like celebration with some of the OGs, right? Like the old time people who were in kind of our company. In fact, one has been here for 5 years, right? So I'm just like very grateful for like what we've kind of worked with them, and there are a couple of them in the Hong Kong office, so we were able to kind of work eat together. But yeah, like there are like we were just sharing these kind of stories that like in a certain, like, so we moved offices every 2 3 years, right? And one of the offices was so difficult, like literally, like I think he Vanson, who's like our team, he was like I literally don't know if tomorrow would happen. It was that tough. But again, like we persevere, and we survived, and I really like that. And it's like the bond, like the group is like great. So we were very very lucky to have like a good group of people who was like very high performing, at the same time very empathetic, very thoughtful. Yeah, so we were very very lucky to have like a team, and of course my co-founder plays a big role in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to just hear 5 years that someone's been working there, right? So it's
Yes.
feel like time flies, but when you're living through it, it always feels like something is really urgent, or something feels like you don't know the next day is coming.
Yes, 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 yeah.
So I love to hear about like how you guys just even came up with the idea,
Mm,
because I know you got connected with Ken. Did Ken already have an idea, or did you guys
yes.
have to brainstorm together? Okay.
Yeah, so he did, yeah. So he, like, Ken is a visionary. Like, he always sees a gap in the market and just kind of like, oh, like, I'm just gonna like go for that. Like, so that's what he's been doing, like, time over time. Like, that's genuinely like kind of what I think. So when we first started the business, we were still kind of, what WATI does is essentially we simplify business messaging, and there's like a SaaS kind of, we build a SaaS platform around helping businesses to simplify business messaging and helping them to kind of manage sales, marketing, and support. Um, and we've always been doing this, right? In fact, we did it with much larger enterprises back then because there's no chat GPT, right? There's like deep learning, machine learning, but it was very very early days. So our the Ken was like, oh, like, hey, like I think there's like there's something here, right, with automating conversations, because in Asia there's also an expectation to message people versus emailing people, right? So he's like, hey, like because of this kind of unique culture of communication preference, like we were like, hey, like it makes a lot of sense for larger organizations. Back then we were thinking of like what's the right target, and we felt like, oh, larger organizations make a lot of sense to automate these conversations and be able to kind of then pass on to kind of support, right? So that was kind of like what we did in the early days. And we did test out the product, and we were very lucky to have Fidelity as our first customer. Yeah, like Fidelity Investments, they're like, hey,
Mhm.
like, yes, I get tons of calls. These are all the kind of questions that they ask. Can you help us to automate, right? So Ken kind of like saw that opportunity, built like both like an omni-channel and admin panel, meaning how to respond, as well as like a monitoring panel there. So he was able to kind of build out the entire um, like a prototype really quickly to test it out with our clients, and then eventually we built like a lot of logic that was available on that.
Got it. And with that first customer, Fidelity, was it really just you guys like reaching out to them and like making the phone calls yourself? How did that like sales motion go? And from there, did you start to reach out to other larger enterprises, or did you kind of start finding other customers that wanted to use the service?
So we decided that we felt these financial institutions is a really good start because of Ken and I actually both work at a bank.
Mhm.
So for another kind of company to go in and say like, hey, like I'll be able to help you. Maybe they don't understand the unique needs for a tech, a finance company, right? Like there's a lot of things on security. There's like a lot of different kind of decision makers,
Mhm.
whereas those things are very familiar to Ken and myself.
Got
Um,
it.
so we started with Fidelity, and we reached out to them via an accelerator. So they were sponsoring two accelerators, so that they were like, oh, like I also wanted, from a business kind of angle, I also wanted to find these type of solutions, but there's no such solutions back then, right? So it was and then they kind of like joined this accelerator that we are also part of, a fintech accelerator, and they're like, oh, like okay, like I really wanted to do POC with these guys, so that's how we started.
Got it. And I know the product then is not the product it is today.
Yes, it
So
is
what
not.
did it really look like at the very very early days? I know
It
you guys
looked,
created this
yeah,
omni-channel messaging platform, but was it
yes,
for like a specific sales, marketing, or customer success use
more for
case?
support.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So these larger
So
organizations really wanted to better communicate and support their customers that they already had.
Yes, yes, yeah. So like a lot of people kind of call up to say like, hey, I wanted. There's a lot of kind of workflows that they have on there. So like, I mean, it's very kind of finance specific and very local specific. So I guess like in the U.S. it's like 401(a). In our
Mhm.
our world, like there's kind of different provident funds that they need to kind of contribute to. So understanding the many things, right? Like understanding like the, how much to contribute, what does a company need to do, when do you need to do it, like a lot of those things.
Got it. And once you started getting a few of these larger customers, I started proving out the product market fit. How did you guys
Yes.
start thinking about developing the product? I know Ken is a little bit more technical, you're more on the business and ops side, but
Yeah.
how did you start to decide on what to build and what the product strategy would look like?
Yeah. So the we do, because like we have I think like 10 plus clients in the early days. Of course it took some time to kind of build it out because of the enterprise kind of sales cycle. We see there's always a convergence of things that they need, right? Like and I think like this is also one of the very interesting moments when we felt like, hey, like maybe as kind of like as the market develops, we saw, frankly, funnily, lesser need to be intelligent. So the funny thing about kind of like artificial intelligence is like, I mean, at least back when kind of we were kind of working with it, is it's non-deterministic, right?
Mhm.
Meaning like the the model needs to like interpret what you're saying, what this person's saying, and then come up with a response that, of course there's like a standard response like, oh, like, hey, like when do you open, and then there's like a 9 to 6, so there's like standard stuff. But then there are also maybe different ways that people ask those questions, and the interpretation might be different, and the answer might not be only 9 to 6, right? It might be something else. So I mean, finance organizations are definitely very complex because they're regulated. And we slowly saw from the beginning there was like more appetite on automating more of lower confidence stuff. Towards at the
Mhm.
end, we saw people were just like, hey, actually, like, hey, can you just, like, if it says this, say that, right? Like, it's a very much like a decision tree type of logic. That's what we saw the market evolve towards, right? Instead of like, hey, I wanted a lot of AI, hey, like it's just like if you ask A, reply B. And then I think that's when we saw like again, I think Ken spotted that out quite early and say like, hey, like maybe we can kind of use this instead of working with larger enterprise, have a very kind of detailed sales process, scope it out, do SOW, do MSA, like all sort of those kind of complex stuff. Let's shorten it and make it a self-service platform. So that's actually kind of like what we did when we started developing WATI and specifically
Mhm.
focusing on WhatsApp.
Got it. Because I know what you guys serve or who you serve today is primarily SMBs,
Yes, yeah.
really helping them be able to do more with less. So
Yes.
it's great to see the evolution of how you guys first started off with larger enterprises and
Yes.
evolved your product into a platform that serves a lot of these smaller businesses.
Yes, yeah. Like frankly, like I think the experience that we had with the enterprise business really helped because we understood what needed to be integrated, how they would want to do it. And frankly, I know like sometimes it's like, hey, like it's a large organization, but they still use spreadsheets, they still use Excels, right? So that's kind of also what we saw, like, hey, like their user behavior is very similar. It's just how they buy is different. How they are served is very different as well. So then we're like, hey, like there are a lot of these very similar themes that we see that we can kind of also develop it in Lottie.
Got it. And how far along in the process, or like, how much time has passed since you guys like made that turning point of wanting to switch to self-serve? Was it about like a year since you guys
four
started? Like,
years.
okay, four
Yeah,
years
yeah, yeah.
since you started the business.
Oh, since we started the business, also 4 years. Yes, 4 years.
Okay, got it.
Yes, yeah. So it was we started in early 2016, and then we made the pivot in 2020. and we were just like kind of developing the product because it took some time, and we were kind of doing two things at the same time, right? Like we serve our larger enterprises and made sure like, hey, like they can pay our bill because
Mhm.
it's a very profitable business, and they do ask for professional services as well, so we had to kind of cater to that for a while. And then later on we were like, hey, like, there's this opportunity, and Ken's like, hey, like, can I just get some budget to kind of do it? And I'm like, well, yeah, like we can do that with like the enterprise business, but what do you think? Like, hey, you're charging what, like $50 per month? Like, when is it ever gonna kind of reach our enterprise kind of like scale?
Mhm.
And obviously he proved me wrong.
I'm sure you're happy to be proven wrong too.
Yes.
So when you guys did make that switch, curious to hear how you guys ended up fundraising, or at least like funding that kind of growth. Did you guys look towards fundraising at the very start, or did you guys have to kind of bootstrap your way through it?
So we were like, we in the early days we had like we joined accelerators, and they were able to kind of give us some kind of seed money to start off with. In the When we developed kind of WATI specifically, we were mainly funding it from our enterprise business because we do
Mhm.
get kind of like subscription revenue as well as professional services revenue. So
Got
we kind of did kind of like, yeah, we got mainly those to kind of fund the development of WATI.
it. Mhm.
And we felt like, hey, like there's a strong pull in the market because, in fact, like a lot of people were calling us because we're one of the official partners in WhatsApp in the early days. So they were like, hey, like, just give me the WhatsApp API, can you do this? Right. So,
Yep.
so we were like, okay, like, well, we need to sign an SOW and, to scope it out. And it's just a kind of way too complex. Right. And then we realized like, hey, actually, there's like a large pool in the market who wants that.
Got it. Got it. Now, from what I see, I spend a lot of time looking at different SaaS businesses and talking to
Yes.
founders. And one of the hardest phase for SaaS is going from this initial phase of like traction to scaling the business.
Yes.
So I'm curious, how did you guys think about scaling this business as you guys launched that self-serve aspect and evolving your product to more of a platform?
Mm. Frankly, I felt like we are flying an airplane and fixing the airplane at the same time. That's exactly kind of what happened. Um, Scaling is another beast, right? So I think in the early days, like what we were just trying to focus on is like, hey, like trying to get customers, and we had a business development plus like a pre-sales consultant and also like a growth hacker, kind of like all in one. So they as a team worked kind of very well together. We were just like, hey, talking to a lot of clients. We have kind of weekly kind of meeting on like, hey, what was the feedback? We iterated the product. Customers were really happy because like it was iterated so quickly. So we kind of had that loop kind of happening. When it comes to that, so that was kind of like getting initial traction, right? When it comes to scaling, we had to find the right people, right? I think that's like the most challenging because you have some traction, but you're not a known brand, right? Like, so the question is like, hey, how do you attract great talent to work with you? And I think that's like the most challenging for scaling, of which we um, have hired Smriti. Smriti is worked at Freshworks before, and she kind of built a few products there. Um, and she was very instrumental in helping us just kind of scale, especially the product side, because it's a product-led growth business. So that's extremely important.
Definitely. That's one common theme that I hear a lot of early stage founders talk about is it's really difficult to have a great hiring process and to
Yes.
attract great talent that is
Yes.
aligned with your mission and is also the right fit for the job. So
Yeah.
how did you think about kind of like building out the culture and building out the team needed for the growth ahead?
Culture is something that I think a lot. So I would kind of call out kind of like things that are not working, call things that are working, right? And then like you're specifically referring to the early days, I'm assuming it is about having the right people in the beginning, right? Because like as I said, like when I was celebrating with a lot of them, like I was very, very grateful that I think they are the culture ambassador of our company, right? Because they are like the initial ones and then they kind of like spread it out. Like it's a lot more like obviously, I need to walk the talk as well, but because they kind of hold such a kind of key role and everyone was like, oh, like these are like the OGs, like how do they do, right? Like if the OGs are like, oh yeah, hey, like I'm getting off at like 3, then that's not like a good kind of signal, right? Versus like they're like, hey, like no, like I am a driver, like that's what we call internally, I'm a driver, not a passenger. So I go drive things, right? Like I have ownership. Like those are the things that were rewarding a lot of the people. I did come up with a set of kind of values, and it was a bit more like, oh, it was just like put on the wall. I think the hardest thing about like the values is not coming up with the values, but it's living the values every day. Like making difficult decisions based on values, like hiring and firing, like promotion, and so everything of those things gives off the signal to your team that like something is valued and something is not,
Mhm.
right? So
It's
I feel that is the very difficult thing, especially sometimes there are, oh wow, there's like this person who is very strong on sales, or um is is great in sales, but it's like terrible to the rest of the company, right? Like they kind of act like they're king. Like I think those are the instances where it's really important to stand true to your value and accept that there are better options out there, right? Like there are other people who can do that job better, plus also kind of meet your culture. Like I think that's always a big trade off, that because there's like the speed thing as well, right? Like you want things now, right? Like you want things
right.
yesterday, but at the same time, you're like, hey, like, no, like I really need to trust the process and know that there's someone out there who can do this job, who is willing to do this job as well as kind of fit your culture. So I think it's like a, yeah, very, very challenging, but it happens across the world anyways. Yeah, it's a cross-cultural thing.
Definitely. And especially as you are scaling up and it's still the early stages of a startup,
Yes.
it's so important to really love the people that you're working with and
Yes.
not only have them be good at their job, but also have them be someone that you want to work with and spend
Yes.
hours in the day with. So I think those are really great, like nuggets of wisdom right there.
Yeah, yeah, like the want to spend time as well, right? Like if you're spending a lot of time but you're struggling, right? Like it's also like you need to create like a fun positive working environment, right? Like everyone wants to kind of play there, and yeah, so I think that's an important thing for you as a founder to kind of like focus on, which is something that I practice to be more positive. Because I mean, frankly, as a founder, like you get thrown in the worst situations usually. There's like, oh, there's this like big problem, right? But then, how do you maintain positivity, and within the team, and also, create that mindset of it's possible.
Mhm. Definitely. I mean, you are like the captain of your ship, so you're kind
Yes.
of seen as the person to kind of like reflect just the values and just like how you tackle problems. So I think it's incredibly important to have that level head, but also to be able to kind of like charge forward through those while being positive throughout the way.
Yes, yes, yes. Because I mean, mostly in a startup, you're like faced with usually impossible kind of challenges, right? So, but then like, how do you find ways through it? Like, how do you say like, hey, it is possible. We just need to kind of figure out another solution, or sometimes also say like, be okay to say like, hey, like this is not like a problem that we solve really well at. Like, we would just focus on something else.
Got it. And as you continue to scale the business to where it's at today, I'm curious, were there any big key turning points or decisions that you felt like you guys made to make Wati where it's at today?
Yeah, I think two things. The first is its pricing. So early days, we were. like, again, coming from an enterprise space, I'm like, I don't want any dollar kind of spared, right? Like, so I felt like, hey, charging for hire, like there are also so many options, solutions out there. And Ken was like, hey, like, why don't we just try at $39 for 5 agents, right? And obviously, I think the rest of the world in the SaaS was very agent based, and each agent would kind of cost very different, depending on the sophistication of the plan, right? So I think that was one of the turning points that we'd had, which is like, hey, like, why don't we offer like a package that's, accessible and economical, and people can just get started that way, right? So I think that's one. The other one that I also found very pivotal was, when we were getting initial traction, we applied to both YC and Surge, which is a program that's run by Sequoia in Southeast Asia, which is now called P15, and we got in both. So then it was actually a really difficult decision, because YC is, like, to me, like the best kind of like accelerator in the world. And the fact that they have like crazy kind of low acceptance rate, and you get accepted, like, and to decline that, I think that's one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. But at the end, I did feel it's a right decision, because they Surge has a stronger Southeast Asia focus, where we have a lot of our team and our customers also in Southeast Asia, like namely India as well. So I feel like the strong India hold that we were able to kind of get about like the entire market, the talent, and all of that is extremely helpful. So I felt like that's another good decision that we made.
Definitely. And I think it made sense, at least for Fitwise, for you guys to go with Peak. And I know that's actually how we connected through Deekun.
Yes. Yes.
At one of Peak's events. But I did want to say that YC is very difficult to get into. I hear it's tougher to get into YC than it is to get into like Stanford or Harvard
Yeah, or
for college.
Harvard. And I'm like, good, I can get into Harvard, and you're like declining or dropping it out. I guess,
Exactly.
somehow you can be Mark Zuckerberg then.
Exactly. But hey, at least now you can say that you turned down YC, which not a lot of people can say.
Yes. No, like, again, I think it's a great organization, but with our product, and it is much more kind of, there are kind of certain markets that works really well, and that is not US right now, right? Given kind of like where WhatsApp is primarily in. So, we felt like, hey, like doing that is kind of very, yeah, like we just felt like, hey, like it's a difficult decision, but hopefully we made the right one.
Definitely. Well, great. Well, now I guess fast forward to where we're at today. WATI is a prominent leader in the WhatsApp ecosystem, and you guys raised a Series B round in late 2022. So you guys are really kind of investing and doubling down on your products, the low code automation piece of it, as well as kind of expanding your go to market in emerging markets like Latin
Yes.
America as well as Southeast Asia. I'm curious, just your thoughts on where you see the future for WATI and what you're most excited about.
Yeah. So I am really excited about the generative AI kind of wave. And I do think there are a lot of ways that we can, because we help businesses do more with less, right? Again, kind of coming back to the core, like that's what we want to do. I do think there's like a lot of space for us to make it much easier for our customers to automate things. So I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is the making us making use of kind of generative AI and making it even more efficient for our customers to do kind of what they need to do within Wati's platform. So I think that's one of the exciting things. The other thing that I find very exciting is that we have so many uh, data within our platform that is what we call it kind of first party data, right? Like, so be it the customer's name, or their preferences, or we also kind of connect with other kind of CRMs like HubSpot,
Mhm.
Shopify, to get some of those kind of like variables. I think there is a lot of opportunity in the mass personalization space. Meaning, how do you reach the right person at the right time with very personalized information, and make them convert more or make it more relevant or yeah, essentially the content more and more meaningful and relevant. So that's another space that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think both of those are really exciting. Like just combining the data in AI to create these better personalized messaging. I think now we live in such a digital world where we're always inundated with all these different ads and we're pretty
Yes.
desensitized by it. So having a very personal like message that you get to your phone, I think is a much better form of advertising. And I think it's a much better way of kind of going about it.
Yes, yes, yeah. I truly believe in that. It's also like, um, I feel like this space is still early, right? Like in terms of like kind of social, sorry, like messaging commerce. And obviously it is already happening a lot in offline, but like how do we make it a bit more structured that is a bit more easier to kind of handle, right? Like rather than like, oh, there's like, 50 chats that I have to see and they all
Mhm.
ask about different things and all I ask about like kind of order history and, how do you kind of make that simpler for the merchant and for our SMB customers. Like, so that's something that I'm very excited about.
Definitely. And one thing I think is really neat for what WATI offers is this click to WhatsApp message,
Yes.
where you're actually able to drive traffic to the WhatsApp message and actually engage with the customers that way. It's something
Yes.
that we in the US don't really see much of. I know Facebook has done some of it, but I think that's a really exciting and very personal channel that I am excited to see more of.
Yes, yeah. In fact, like I think in Asia, I think a lot of the websites already have a click to WhatsApp. It's just like the call to action is usually like click to this kind of landing page and then you click to WhatsApp, right? So now you're kind of cutting that step down. And I think the exciting thing is also not only on the Facebook and kind of Meta ecosystem that you can do click to WhatsApp. In fact, Google is also launching a click to WhatsApp as well,
Oh wow.
right?
Okay.
So you kind of get those two data points, right? Like from click to WhatsApp on kind of Meta, like obviously that's already kind of happening, and we have also Cappy, which is a kind of conversion API that
Mhm.
sends back the signal of like, hey, like did this convert or like this did become an actual lead, right? So and also kind of with the data from kind of Google, you can kind of combine those and kind of all see the click to something kind of revenue and conversions and kind of drive automation that way. So I think that's actually very exciting.
Yeah, and that's super powerful, especially for SMBs that
Yes.
don't really have all the resources to be able to do that themselves. This is
Mm.
with the one-click integrations and be able to kind of optimize this messaging. I think it's really doing a lot for a lot of small business owners. That's a lot of what we spent time at HubSpot thinking about how to really enable SMBs to do more with less. So I think it's a really exciting vision, and what you guys have built has been super impressive.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So we try to, yeah, listen to our kind of customers and then kind of evolve with like them. And also like I think the fun thing is like a lot of them also become bigger, right? So like how do we also kind of evolve with them when they become larger organizations that, might start to look at, processes and other things,
Mhm.
right? So I think, those are very exciting things that we're doing.
Exactly. It's like you're being a part of every single customer's journey as they scale. You're kind of being along there with them.
Yes, I hope to be the Robin.
Awesome. Well, I guess one last question: as you start to look back on just this entire journey, are there any big lessons that you've learned along the way that's really stand out to you?
Lessons. Mm.
Or I guess, in other words, if you were to do it all over again, is there one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Oh, there's so many.
I'm sure.
I would say people makes or breaks it. That's what I saw, right? Like whatever that works, it's like the people, and whatever that doesn't work, it's also the people. Like I think that's a funny part about it. I would say be clear on like okay, so like again back to people, right? I it's like a lot of things that you need to figure out. But like I think the fun I think the advice that I was think about, and if I were to do it again, is that if there are people who doesn't work out, um that's okay, and you don't need to force it kind of like to happen. Then you just need to kind of a make your expectations clear on kind of what you're expecting, see whether you're getting that, um, and then like and obviously kind of do it very gracefully, and obviously kind of be a big supporter and cheerleader for them kind of after. But I think it's okay to not work out. Like I think before I had a strong affinity to like, oh, like let's try to make it work, or I'll always kind of find other reasons that it works, but in fact, then I'm always over justifying for like it. Like it almost feel I always like use this analogy that I find really funny, but it's almost true. It's like an ex that you need to kind of like like not kind of work. It doesn't work out with your ex, and there are obviously things like Spock's that like works well, but you're always trying to like figure out like, and then there's like it just
Mhm.
doesn't work, right? So I think it's better to part ways, and find another person. You have to also trust the process of finding another person that works really well, right? So I think sometimes it's like the fear of not finding another person, or like you feel like, hey, it's going to have a huge business impact, but most of the times it's already kind of too late when you address that. So that's something that
Mhm.
I've learned for people.
Definitely. Well, I think it's really hard to be decisive, especially when there's people involved.
Yes,
But
exactly. Because you've
sometimes,
like built relationships and all that, right?
exactly. But sometimes, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. Sometimes it's just not the
Yes.
right fit. So it's better
Hmm.
just to understand that there's a mistake made and just kind of move on from it.
Yes, yes, yeah. So like being comfortable with that, right? Like I think that's also important for you to be comfortable and also plan ahead, right? Like if you feel and also have that kind of, I think, open conversation, right? I think that's also important.
Definitely. And going back to your point on it being so important about people, I think when I look at some of the biggest businesses today, it's all kind of comes back to like the founder and the team that built it, right? There would be no business
Yes.
without the people. And the kind of like grit and tenacity and having to iterate and put out fires. It's really difficult to be a founder, and it's so important to continue to have such a great like vision and culture, and it's all about like executing on it. And
Yes.
that's not that's
Nothing trumps
it's
like execution.
exactly, it's a very difficult path, so it's not for everyone. But I'm really excited to just continue to see how Wati continues to grow, and what you've built has been super impressive. So I'm really excited and happy that you're able to come on and share your story and how you built the business.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having us.
Of course. And one last question: is there anywhere that people can find you or learn more about Swati?
Yeah, sure. So our website is www.wati.io. WATI stands for WhatsApp Team Inbox. So in case that makes it a bit easier, you can always find me on LinkedIn, Bianca, Bianca, and then HO. So I'll see you there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Bianca.
Thank you.